And welcome into Before and After Talks. It's been a while, but I love hearing that song every time we start it out. I was thinking about it earlier today. We've had that since May 26th. That was our first episode. And there was just something about that song. And you know, me as a very wealthy podcaster, I paid nothing for it. It was definitely free. So added that to our Before and After Talks podcast. And I'm Vince. I'm joined by Maddie here again. She always gives me the highest rated episodes. So I just bring her on. That's not the only reason.
I'm taking that as a compliment. I don't know what I'm doing, but I must be doing something right.
People must love your voice, your takes on things.
I don't have the radio, podcast type of voice, but yeah, maybe I can provide a little bit of something extra to it. So if I can do that, that sounds great to me.
Plus I get to look at you a little bit.
I like that.
All right, so today we're going to get started, or in a little bit, we're going to talk about violence and video games. But before we get to that, we just want to talk about where you can follow us.
You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Our handle is Before and After Talks.
On everything.
On everything now, exactly. I'm still getting used to that because when we first started, it was just before and after. So I'm still trying to remind myself of that exact fact. We also can be found on iHeartRadio, which is kind of a newer thing. Trying to think, am I missing anything else? I probably am. You can always look us up on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you basically get your podcasts.
Yeah, I love doing it on Spotify because I have an Xbox, or if you have like a Roku or anything, you get it on the big screen, you see our logo, you hear our voices. It's pretty fun. But other than that, today is the 8th, and we posted the calendar for the rest of the month for October. We have 4 episodes coming out, and this is one of them. So Violence of Video Games comes out, we're recording it before, obviously, so it's going to come out on the 11th. That is this coming Friday. Next, we're going to have the Before on Ed Sheeran's number 6 collaboration project.
Whoop, whoop.
That's coming out on the 15th, and we're going to do the After full review for that whole album. We were looking for something to talk about, and we've been kind of reviewing movies a lot recently, and we wanted to switch it up. Mm-hmm. And Maddie, I had you on before for, I think, our only music review, which was Pink's album.
Pink's newest album that came out last April. So, and I can't believe that was already last April. That was a long time ago.
Even though it's not totally current as of right now, they're kind of still circling and cycling through all the songs.
Oh, they are. So I would say it's still current because, I think that came out like early summer, I believe, sometime in May, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So, but yeah, they, just as you said, I'm still hearing the song cycle through on the radio. So I still think it's current, and it is one fantastic album. So I can't wait to review that.
Maddie just wanted to brag about it and talk about it the entire time. So we're going to do that later in October. And to kick it off before Halloween, we're going to give you a full, I think it's around 3 hours. It's the 3rd edition of After Hours. That's with Devin. He's quoted as the loud one on Facebook. And with Graydon, he's in the Army and stuff like that, and we were talking a lot of Area 51 and just getting his take on different things. But we're about to get started. So, like I mentioned, After Hours, we had the 2nd edition. That was with Billy and Sean, and we were talking about violence and video games because at the time of that recording, there was the 2 mass shootings. If you want to call them mass shootings or not.
It's sad that when you say mass shootings, I have to kind of go back through my head of like,
which
one are you talking about? And that's really terrible.
I think that's what we got into a little bit. But there was 2 of them. One was in a Walmart in Texas, I believe, and the other one was in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah, El Paso and Dayton, and then they happened, I believe, a week within each other. The time span. It was around that.
I don't know where it was in Ohio, but...
You said Dayton.
I just mean, was it in a store or something? I don't remember exactly the details, but it got brought up in the 2nd edition of After Hours. You can go check that out on all platforms. And there's a little bit of a trailer that got it started because I had a Facebook post of the quote. I think it was Billy who said it, but he said, "They're just trying to find something to pin the blame on, and I don't think it should be video games." So that right there caused a little bit of controversy. It's obviously one of those topics, and I wanted to get you guys to respond to it. So later in the show, we're going to read your comments that we went through. And Maddie, what else are we going to be covering?
We are going to be covering a little bit of everything. We're going to be dipping into a lot of different stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear about those comments that are on Facebook or the social media posts that you had done, because we did get quite a few good comments that were relayed back to us, and it was fun reading those. Because this is such a controversial topic, we will start to explain maybe our thoughts and why we might think it is. A little brief research from a couple of well-known other platforms like magazines and newspapers within the past couple of years. We will be looking at some of the top video games around this time, around fall 2019, because there's always new ones coming out. Looking at those, the favorites, and also on how a new movie that has just recently debuted and how there might be some controversy with that. And spoiler, it has to do with the Batman Joker series.
Yes, so. Joker, there was plenty about it, and I think it ties in perfectly to this. So Maddie, why don't we get started?
Sounds good to me.
Do video games and playing violent video games contribute to violence in society? Billy says they're just looking to pin it on something. And you obviously can't pin the violence that we've seen strictly in video games. Or is it completely, you can never be sure that that's the reason. They're not going around saying that.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why it's controversial, because I think Billy's comment about wanting to have a scapegoat for these sort of terrible and horrible things that have been happening, I don't think they're wrong for maybe trying to point fingers at certain things, because when these terrible things happen, you can't always just blame. It's not one factor, but you also can't eliminate these sort of ideas, or just something so minuscule as violent video games, or you could even include violent media. You can't completely erase it from the conversation either, because they are very prominent in the way that we interact with each other, the way that we play games with each other now, and so what we see in this world, and I hear this from my parents, I don't know about your parents or anybody older and in the next generation, they talk about how violent, but how just so much more graphic things are, and how the amount and the type of media that's out there is just so different than it has been in the past couple of decades. So they're really kind of pushing the limits and those kind of those buttons to see how far they can pull it, but we're absorbing it. Our society just loves that kind of stuff. So, we just keep grabbing it and pulling it into, we're absorbing it.
Yeah, to go off that point, I'm a college student right now. We both are, and I'm a film minor, so that got brought up in class a lot, just how violence is a big thing, and there's always wanting to be more and more. So they showed us stats between, if you watch the first Rambo or something, they showed the death totals in that.
Yeah. And
then the Rambos after that, it just keeps going up. And we're also watching noir films, so 50s, around that. Not a lot of sex or not too much violence, but then it started ramping up in the 90s, and they started having more sex and violence just because people wanted it more and it was more appealing. So
it's edgy, and people want to see these kind of things, the boundaries that haven't been pushed before. So, you keep pushing these boundaries. And this kind of even taps on the topic that we talked about last time when you had me with Dave Chappelle's comedy special. It's those boundaries. You like to walk that fine line to see where you can push it next. So, yeah. The public loves pushing that and loves seeing where they're going to take things next, just to make things more interesting, because when you push those boundaries, that's what grabs our attention.
All right, now getting into our topic, Maddie, I know you've never seen a movie before.
Stop. Side note, he makes fun of me all the time because him and his family they watch a ton of movies, and I'm jealous of it because they know everything. So then whenever they bring something up, I've just told them to assume that I haven't watched it, because they've seen so many stuff that I don't know. Like I said, talk about music, I got you. But
you've seen quality movies like The Hangover and Moana. There you go.
Why do you do this to me?
All I'm getting at is here, have you ever seen a movie that inspired you and got you right after you got out of the theater, did you feel pumped to go do something? You wanted to go out, or was there something violent in that movie? I know for myself, when the first Incredibles came out, was that more than 10 years ago?
It was
violent.
We were so young, and that's Disney Pixar. But you're right, there are some fight scenes in there.
I'm just getting at the feeling. So have you ever been from that feeling? So Dash, super fast in The Incredibles. Once I left the theater, I started sprinting to the car thinking I was Dash.
Imagining little Vince just sprinting.
He wasn't little, he was very fat. No.
Stop.
A pudgy Vince running to the car, and then I fell. But regardless, have you had that kind of feeling?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure.
It has a good ending, and you just want to go out and do stuff.
Sometimes, I was going to say, I can't necessarily pinpoint it to something being violent, and then all of a sudden feeling like my blood's pumping, and I'm like, I gotta go punch something. You know, I'm not saying that that's what most people do anyway, but
I gotta punch it.
I know. I'm trying
Even
to
just
think
a
if there's
good-
even.
if
Yes,
not, we'll move on.
I feel like I have. I just can't pinpoint exactly a movie.
All right.
I also don't go to the theater much anymore. So like,
Because she doesn't watch movies.
stop.
But you acknowledge that movies can
Yes.
make you feel good,
Oh.
make you feel bad, and want to go do stuff.
Okay, I'll relate it to something maybe a little bit more that I could do, or that I can.
Definitely not movies.
Okay, well, movies I've seen some. I don't live under a rock, but some TV shows
Yep.
that I watch. It's still a similar form of media, just not a 2-hour one. A lot of times, unless if you binge watch, but I have had where I watch a movie a TV show, and I feel really good afterwards, or I just have this different like perspective, or it just really made me think about something. So it changed my course of thinking and my emotions in those 25 or 50 minutes that I was watching that. So it does impact the way that we kind of perceive and kind of go through life maybe immediately after.
So with that, you take that feeling and you see a late movie, you come home, you can't do much with that feeling, or you do go out with your friends. But with video games, you physically are in control of whatever you want to do.
Yes.
You control how you feel, you take in your emotions from that day, and you play that game. Now, I'm someone who just plays to play, and there's a lot of people who do that. But if you're a person who plays video games, you've also experienced a bad day, and you've probably used that energy and brought that into a game. I don't know if you have any perspective on that or thoughts.
I don't necessarily, because this is kind of getting into our difference of perspectives that, you just said, like, you will just play video games and you play them to play, but you do play them a lot more. I'm more the occasional person, a little bit more like on the social end, and I'm playing like moderate games, like, the classics of, Mario Party or like Super Mario Bros. Or, something like that.
Yeah, on the Switch or something.
Exactly. Or like, I used to love my Nintendo DS that I had. Like, in
Beautiful.
I loved that thing.
Love it.
I played PS2 with my brother, but this was like, 5th grade Maddie. So this was a little bit far back. So I have a little bit of understanding. I can't necessarily say that like I've like taken my
Experienced
day
that.
and then like gone back into it and like, like, I don't know, to relate it back right back into it and being like, I've had a terrible day. I need to release
Play
my
Mario
energy.
Kart.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, I'm gonna knock someone off this like track. Like, no, I can't say I have. But that's the difference of perspectives that we have. So hopefully, our listeners will be able to kind of get both of ours, because not everything is never one-sided, excuse me.
Well, we're going to get into mental health a tiny bit when we talk about the Joker. But, one other question we're going to get to later is how come, people like me can play video games, but we're not affected to the point of violence. But basing off of that, there's points where I believe even my friends have felt it. When I'm playing a game and I get super into it, I just lose everything in my peripheral, and I feel like I'm in that game. You just get sucked in, and all you see is what's on that screen. You miss everything around side you, and that's just, being focused on something as well.
I was gonna say, I don't think that's necessarily like, those listening might think of like, well, that's like almost like borderline obsessive, but that's really more or less anything that, like, when you're having a total and complete involvement or an experience with something, if you're playing a basketball game, or if you're I don't know, you're racing, or you're doing something else, or even if you're doing something more calm and you're painting, the only thing that you are focused on is that target or whatever is holding your attention. So I can understand that. I just want to like debunk that side of like, well, that kind of sounds like obsessive. No, that's just having you're putting 100% of you into that. Like, all of your energy is going towards that. So that's just complete and utter focus at that.
No, I agree. And that just kind of ties into then if you place those certain individuals, the ones that do end up committing violence or something like that, if they have something similar or if they just get really into it. But now, Maddie, we kind of already went over our thoughts a little bit. I don't know if you want to address the question head on instead of a little bit more from a perspective wise. If you want to address, is there a connection between video games and violence in society?
It's interesting.
If you saw that,
yeah.
what do you go to? What's your...
So like when that question is prompted or asked, like, what's my initial gut? I would say, so in my own point of view and my experiences, I still stand on the fact that it's not the only factor that contributes to societal violence, but it's also not, it also just can't be eliminated. I don't see it as it being one of the top ones to be considering. I think life is complicated and backgrounds have a lot to do with things, parenting, like family, social life, mental health does have some sort of effect on it as well. So I think that there are just so many bigger and broader factors that play way too much into societal violence. To attribute it to video games, and maybe that's just like in my life and how I've grown up, I don't see it as it contributing in a major way towards society, just because of my experiences, my other, like my friend, you, my brother, everybody that I've grown up around. I haven't seen anything exhibited saying that this is such a negative thing that we can really put that as like one of our even top 3 factors. I really don't say
But it still is a factor.
I would say
possibly.
Well, and I'm going back, exactly. I can say that it might be one of the things leading into it, but I can't say it's like the top ones. I feel like there are much more.
Yes, probably.
There are many more things that we should be probably focusing on before we get to video games when it comes to societal violence. But the media that is out there now, especially with social media platforms, movies, TVs, or like TV shows, video games does include in that. But any sort of media that's out there now, even we're getting it at such a young age. We're getting so much more of it, and the boundaries that the producers and platforms are putting out there, like they're pushing it so much more. I'm even thinking, I'm student teaching. I'm a senior in college as well, and so the kids that I'm with in my school on a daily basis, I'm with some sassy 5th graders, but they have nicer phones than I do, and the stuff that they talk about with each other is very much involved in the media that they see on a daily basis. When they go home, they go onto TikTok or they go onto Snapchat or all these sort of things. And I'm not saying that those are violent platforms, but it's so much. There's so much more out there than I think like we've grown up with, even the 10-year difference or so in generations before. So I can't rule it out because it's so prominent in our day-to-day life, but at the same time, I don't think it's the main thing. There are so many bigger and broader things that we need to worry about before we get to video games.
I'm going to hold off. I really don't need to share my thoughts because I feel the exact same way.
Okay.
You can't contribute to it. I can see why it would. Violent video games would do that. And I just, a quick Google search about video games and violence. And can you guess a video game that popped up right away?
Well, I mean, when I think video game violence, I think of stuff like Call of Duty and like all of those things personally, because that's what we were kind of growing up with a little bit more. Like when we were in like middle and high school, like Call of Duty was such a huge thing. I remember it being. But what were you thinking?
Well, I wasn't thinking. I saw the first thing that popped up was Grand Theft Auto. So
oh
that
my gosh. It's kind of weird that I was about to say a classic because everybody just knows Grand Theft Auto. But yeah, that definitely falls in that category because sometimes, I mean, I've played it with you before, and it's fun to just kind of, mess around. Just to kind of be like, I'm just going to hit this person because I can. And it's just like, it's more funny than like,
that's how we take it. Yeah.
We take it as more of like, it's just comical because of like the ways and like the
super
missions you have to do.
Exactly.
The absurdity of some of the stuff. It's just like, why not? But other video games might not be quite it might be a little bit more realistic than that too. So it's kind of.
All right. Did you want to get into your New York Times article or do you want to get into the comments first?
Let's do the article real quick because I really want to save the comments to the end because I want to put our viewers or our listeners in the end just so that our listeners can hear that. And if they feel compelled that they want to comment back or if, we have any more conversations beyond this, I would love to just end with that. So that it concludes our thoughts as well.
Perfect. Well, let's hear it.
There's just a couple things that I had found going out. So
the Time Magazine, sorry, not New York Times.
No, that's okay.
We'll skip that.
Yeah, because honestly, I had a New York Times newspaper article from 2013 that I was going to touch on, but honestly, we've already touched on everything that we wanted to.
As well.
So just in our natural conversation. So I'm going to go to the Time Magazine article that was just released in August. That was the top 10 video games of fall 2019. So this is very current, and we can evaluate this list right away because, we're talking about this as current day, and I'm sure you will be able to pick out a couple of them. So really the purpose of this is I wanted to see out of these 10 which ones we would consider quote unquote violent, and then your perspective, whether you've played them before, whether you're interested in them.
I thought this was a really creative idea because after hearing the list, I was like, wow, she has a point.
Yes. So Time Magazine, the 10 video games we can't wait to play this fall is what it's titled. Matthew Galt wrote this in August of 2019. So he has listed 10 of his top ones for this season. So the first one that comes up is Borderlands 3.
Violent.
I have been seeing this title out and about, just kind of in a couple stores, so I'm at least familiar with the title, and I've heard our friends talking about it a little bit, so I'm just kind of familiar in that way. But what's your take on it?
Definitely violent. It's more comical, and it's not a realistic looking game. You can't say cartoon, but it's animated, as all video games are. But you can I can show you, and you can see what I mean.
Okay. As I'm reading, I'm looking at the article right now, and I like how you said humorous because it does touch on that. It says it's crass but lovable humor, cel-shaded cartoon graphics, and commitment to piles and piles of strange and wonderful weapons makes this the fall's first must-buy.
All right, so we're 1 for 1 on violent.
So for sure, violent. He checks that box off. The next one that is listed is The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening.
Yeah, so that was just remastered. That's the old one. It still has that, GameCube
type of
look to it.
vibe.
So I'm not gonna.
So
you're not having a rough day.
So you're not
that.
checking the violent box on that one.
1 for 2.
1 for 2. All right. So he is putting the X on that one. The next one is Destiny 2 relaunch.
Yep, that's another just shooter game. That's going to be 2 for 3. That one you can definitely just go in, just continue to shoot whatever you want.
Got it. Next one, The Outer Worlds.
Yes, I'm going to go again with violent. A little bit more of an exploration game.
It does talk about how it's far-flung future based, and it's a very interesting description of it. Humanity has colonized the stars and the edges of the known universe. Capitalism is in full swing and crushing folks. So this
that one,
author
I think
knows
you're
what he's
more
talking
into
about.
into the lore of it, the world, instead of the violence. But
Yes.
I'll still count it just because
But
it is a shooting game.
Yes,
and you're
you
doing
still
a lot
have
of things.
to have that aspect in there in order to do it.
Outer Worlds is just like it's very similar to Fallout for anybody who's played that.
Okay.
And in Fallout, you can do a close-up mode that slows down the death, and it really shows you everything that happens. So if they do that in there,
Because
I
if
mean,
you
that's
really
violence.
want to get graphic with it, I guess I really want to see the way I stabbed this guy right through the. Yeah, I don't know.
No,
That's
I'm
interesting.
gonna punch you.
Yeah, I'm gonna punch
As you
you.
said earlier. All right, continue.
Next one, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. And I kind of questioned you on this one because I'm not, like I said, I don't live under a rock, but I mean, Call of Duty was huge when we were growing up. So, and I swore there was a Modern Warfare, but you just basically said it was a remaster of
They're
this
kind of
game.
like going back to the basics because they got too far into the future, and it was just a lot of jetpacks, a lot of just how you look, the aesthetic of it. It was much different than the war game that Call of Duty started out as. So if they're kind of going back to that, violent. How about that?
So it's they're finding their roots again. is
Finding their
basically what
roots,
they're-
yes.
All right. So violent, we say. So next one, Luigi's Mansion 3.
Super aggressive. Just
Hey, well, you
That's
want to
the
just
main reason
explore
for
a haunted
violence.
mansion as a plumber. Why not? I don't know why that would be considered violent. So no violence to that one.
no, not really.
Cartoon violence, still not really counting it.
I'm not counting the Luigi's.
All right.
Nothing on a
Okay.
Switch. You know what I mean? Nothing in the Mario
Nothing
genre
in that
or
Mario world.
Spyro or Crash Bandicoot or anything.
Gotcha. I get it. Because, yeah, that's quite a difference from Modern Warfare. So
And comparing it to GTA.
true.
So-
Yes. When you put that perspective in that. The next one listed is Death Stranding.
I think it's more horror. It's
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to count violence with horror for the reason we're talking about it.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, in a way, maybe. I don't. If it depends on the horror, like I guess if it's more of like a scary movie type. I'm not saying the
It is
scary
a-
movie sort of.
A cinematic game. They used was it Norman Reedus from
Yep, he's listed. That it
Yeah,
stars
so-
Norman Reedus.
they acted him out from The Walking Dead. That's what I was thinking of. So
Okay.
they acted this out. It's just visually pleasing.
Okay.
Very, very interesting story.
Okay, so more cinematic based. But
Yes.
are you going to put the check mark on violent or not violent?
I don't think it's like a complete violent game. So I'm gonna say no, or you know what, stick with it. Violence.
Okay, violence.
Because that horror's still in there. He's still gonna be shooting stuff, and that is just a big
That's
cue.
fair. I would say that's fair. Next one, Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Again, like Luigi, you got to watch out with this one.
Hey.
But I'll say no.
Catching them all just takes a little kick and a punch there. All right, last, no,
Two more?
second to last one, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
If it's the ones that I'm thinking about, and it's Star Wars, there's definitely a lot of violence in there, and you can. I haven't played that one exactly, but in previous ones, you kind of become the Sith, and you see yourself become more angry and aggressive, and you can do a lot in that game.
The characteristics that are associated with that side.
And the Star Wars games, they make them and show them just like the movies are. It's really cool how they show them. So if you're into Star Wars, but
it's a stylistic thing.
It's still violent. And then I'll let you answer this last one.
This last one, if you haven't figured out, just listen to the title and figure out whether you put the check mark on the violent or non-violent. The last one in this list is called Doom Eternal.
A little bit deeper. Let me hear it.
Doom Eternal. I'm gonna put in a check on violence because
Doom.
If you're putting Doom as the first word as your title, I feel like that's a little destructive and you're kind of setting yourself up.
A little bit more than punching there, fella.
So that was the last one on our list. So we're saying that one was violent. So the ones that we are saying that are not violent would be the Luigi's Mansion, the Pokemon game, and the Legends of Zelda.
Okay, so 7 out of 10?
7 out of 10 of them are considered violent.
And those are the top video games coming out fall 2019.
The ones that people will most likely be willing to buy and willing to play. It's going to be the most streamed, most likely. So the number 7 out of 10, what's your take on that?
Like I said before, I'm glad you thought of this alone because that's such a great thing. Just the fact that there's 10 top video games, and those are the top video games as of right now, and 70% of them are just violent and shooters. Like, they continue to keep going that direction, and you see a lot of less. I don't know what else it would be. I haven't played a game recently that isn't violence other than maybe Madden or something. So
that's true. Well, and I mean, the 3 that we had rated not violent, I mean, you can get into a topic or discussion about, do you count cartoon violence as violence? Would you count that? Because I mean, you're still kicking and punching and you're still doing.
I agree. I'm just trying to picture from like playing video game perspective. You're playing Mario, you're playing Luigi.
When you're looking at it from the
else.
broad view, comparing GTA to Mario, you're definitely going to put Mario on the not violent category, which I would agree with too. It's one of those things that you're not going to argue super hard on because Mario's been around for years, and I mean, even though video games and the association with violence in society has been a topic of study since the 1980s when violence or video game have been pretty prevalent. It's kind of like in the grand scheme of things, like if you can't take that, then yikes. But I do have to say the 3 out of 10, those 3 that we did mention, kind of gives me a little bit of hope because it still shows that there's still a platform of quote unquote non-violent games that people still love and enjoy.
And I think with the Nintendo Switch, it's just continuing off of Nintendo.
That's true. Nintendo, I feel like brought back. I mean, they knew that those are the classics that everybody knows and loves, and everybody can play them. You don't need a ton of skill. I can't say about. Some of them might need that, but I'm just saying like Mario Kart, everybody can pick that up pretty quickly. So the fact that those kind of games are still around and that they are still in the top 10 list, that kind of makes me happy just because, you don't want to see everything being doom and destruction.
See, I think it's also tough too because I can't narrow down the age group that video games are meant for because they're meant for...
Well, they have the ratings on the video games, but it's kind of like movies. Like, do you really pay attention too much to the like movie ratings? I mean, I think maybe
Something
a rated R.
Me, yes.
Maybe a rated R, but like PG-13 now, like when you were watching PG-13 when you were 10 years old or not, so
Adult
it's kind of exactly. Oh, jeez. So but when you think about video game ratings, they have those ratings. Rated E 10 plus. There's rated M and like all of those sort of things. So like how much are people really taking that into consideration and are they being rated right? But that's a whole nother that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But
just want to bring that up because there's going to be kids and teenagers playing it, but you can't stop them from playing certain
no, yeah, you can't.
rated games. So I had another article.
Perfect.
If you want to, just it kind of goes into that.
Yeah.
But it's from CNBC. Sarah Whitten wrote it in August 9th, 2019, so last month. She said there was an issue with some politicians blaming video games for violent acts, but she said there's no research to back up this claim. She's definitely right. There's no way to prove that.
Well, there's research. This
Kinda going
kind of
towards
goes
it?
back to. I'm going off of that just because I'm going back to my New York Times article from 2013. I mean, it's playing the video games. It does stir a hostile urge and kind of the aggressive behavior in the short term. Kind of like when you were talking about how when you get out of a movie or something like that, you kind of feel it for the first 5-10 minutes, and you're like, wow, that really impacted you. It kind of gets not the adrenaline rush, but kind of in that same way. But there's no, it's not clear yet whether over long periods of time, such habits of these would increase the likelihood that somebody would create commit a violent crime murder or assault or something like that. So, there's research out there, but to research the long term is so much harder out there because there's so many different factors.
Well, the main part of this article that I brought up, and the article is named "No Evidence That Violent Video Games Are Causing Mass Shootings Despite Politicians' Claims," if you want to look that up on CNBC. But the main point was the U.S. isn't even the largest consumer of violent video games, yet it has one of the highest violent gun death rates.
Interesting. Does it say which country is the largest consumer?
I didn't go too far into the article.
Okay.
I can find that for later. But
okay, perfect.
I just looked at the headlines in there and just want to look at that because that's a major thing.
That's huge. And again, I think that right away then tells us that there are other things going on that are not the video games. Because if video games were the one, that main cause, I feel like there'd be a lot more data backing it up. Our gun violence would correlate a little bit more with the amount of violent media that we intake. But I'm not saying that if we don't have to, that we have to be the top country to consume that in order for that to make sense. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it surprises me because the United States kind of has a rap for not really caring sometimes. And the stuff that we consume in media and food and all of the sort of things, we're a little out there sometimes in comparison to other countries. So that's interesting that we're not even the top consumer.
Well, I found one. I didn't want to read the entire article while you were talking, but I kind of skimmed through and I found he mentioned, he says, countries where video games are the most popular tend to be among the safer countries in the world. And you see, he brought up South Korea and Japan as examples. And this was the person that she interviewed. I still think it's popular here. Still a problem, though.
Yeah, food for thought, honestly. That's a very interesting take in other countries that are similar to us, but also different to us in other ways as well. So
I think the fact
that's just a part of a larger conversation that we are continuously having.
Exactly. And I think the fact that we're, as she said, and even if it isn't true, it's still somewhat close. We still have the highest gun death kills, whatever it was. So still just an interesting point, but that kind of, do you want to get into the Joker?
Yes, I do, because you actually brought up a couple of points that I hadn't even heard about yet in the news. So I would love to hear about that sort of kind of this controversy that's happened with this new movie that's come out. Yeah, a little bit.
So not video games, obviously, but it still has the same...
Still media, violent media.
Yeah, exactly. So The Joker just came out. It shows the origin story of him battling with his mental health and showed how he became the Joker and what led to it. In this movie, plenty of violence. You see, it's not, how the Joker is. At some point in the movie, there will be violence and he will snap finally after it builds up and builds up and builds up. So there was a lot of worry about this because back when the Batman came out, was the Arkham Knight series, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There was a shooting in Colorado. I think it killed 12 in a movie theater, and some guy dressed up as Batman or the Joker, one of the two. So they worried that in this movie there would be the same kind of result because the Joker is just influential in the fact that you can be feeling the same exact way, and the things he does in there, I'm not going to go through what happens in the movie, but the things he does in there kind of, if you're feeling that way, inspires you to want to take action, and that's what they worried about. So a lot of cities upped their security in the movie theaters and around it. And in New York City, they even had cops go undercover and actually just be in the theater as someone, viewing it, but they would take action. As of now, there hasn't been too much because the movie just came out, and obviously with the raised security, not a lot's going to happen. In Chicago, 2 people got arrested, and in New York, there was actually one person who came in and started surveying the crowd, and there was a lot of worry about that person. And the third thing that I found was somebody just started laughing at every murder scene in The Joker. Now, a lot of murder scenes are unexpected and maybe sometimes funny in the context of what type of movie it is. But in The Joker, this movie, it's a serious film.
It's serious. I mean, I know it's make-believe, but the way that they portray his character, the way that they portray the society in that way, that's kind of serious stuff.
And I cringed at one of the deaths. There is deaths in there, and not spoiling. I cringed. I couldn't imagine laughing at it because it was maybe just a slight chuckle. It was super unexpected.
More of like the
shock value.
A slight, it's the like shock value or like the slight like discomfort, and you're just kind of like easing that discomfort, like
exactly.
Like wow, like kind of like oh, well that just happened, and just moving on from it. But that's
the person's laughing hysterically. Like, all right, we stay away from him.
Yeah, I guess everybody would probably feel a little on edge at that. It's kind of scary that things have come to that point. I mean, I'm so thankful and happy that the people around this movie who are making it, and just the people within the movie industry had seen this coming, so that they had taken the precautionary actions that are needed, because this is a powerful type of media that is out there. But that's just, I mean, it's crazy when you have to think about it. It's like they upped security to go see a movie because they weren't sure of how the audience, how certain individuals in an audience may react to it. That's powerful stuff. That is a powerful movie right there.
And I'll be honest, it affected me, the movie, a little bit. I felt weird after, and the Marvel movies basically spoiled me on the fact that there was an end of credit scene.
Yeah.
So I stayed at the end of the movie, and everybody left, and I was the only one in the quiet theater after what I just saw from The Joker. And I started being really creeped out, and I was looking around and stuff, but I was uncomfortable. That was the word to describe that entire experience. But to go off of that Joker, don't want to talk about the movie the entire time, just the fact that people watch that movie and see that violence and feel that, it kind of ties into video games, kind of the same effect. Do you see that effect at all, or is there less of a tie?
Well, I think that it would be the similar effect to a video game, because that is an immediate and short-term reaction to what you are in the moment seeing. And I understand that has it plays on your emotions, because that's what movies are supposed to do. They're supposed to play on emotions, and good movies make you laugh, cry, jump.
Yeah.
They play on your emotions.
And with the Joker, you see him do stuff, but in violent video games, you get to do the stuff. I don't know if that matters.
It does matter. I would say in a way it does matter, because exactly how you just said, the video games, you are the person who is in charge of the actions. I mean, you could go into a violent video game and technically not kill anybody if you really want to.
Yeah.
And this
exactly.
I know that we have a friend who, when he plays with you guys, that he tends to just be like the medic, and he like gets you supplies. Yeah. So I actually forgot it was Spencer. So yeah, Spence, your name was just dropped in this unintentionally. So
he refused this, and Battlefield is the game. That sounds like a war game, doesn't it? He refuses to use his gun. He just picks us up. That's all.
That is the most wholesome thing.
Right?
I don't know anybody who does it, right? But yeah, no, you are in control. Going back to what we were talking about, you're in control of the video game. So, I mean, you have the choice, as Spencer does when he makes that choice. And I'm not saying that those who pick up the gun and go shoot somebody in a video game is making a bad choice. I'm not saying that at all. It's just the fact that you are the one that's controlling the story. You're controlling your character's actions. And so through that, since you are in control, you might internalize some stuff, maybe a little bit more. But that movie review and like the controversy kind of behind, and like, the current events that have been happening with the movie is also interesting, because I think it just takes a little bit more of a broader view on society, instead of it just being video games, and how powerful media is nowadays.
And to see how worried we are about it.
Yeah.
And before we move on to the social media comments and the poll and just the Facebook comments we got alone. I wanted to apologize. I was rambling a little bit, but my head's just like, on this topic, you can go in so many directions.
You can.
And to stay in one lane is a little tough.
This question that we've posed for this topic is so broad. It opens up a world of conversation, and that's why it's controversial, because you can go so many different ways with it, and there are so many factors in itself that are playing into this question. So you have to examine all the different corners and crevices of this question, because that's the only way that you're really going to get good conversation and good answers from it. Or maybe not even answers. Maybe you're just having food for thought, and you're thinking about the ways that it is impacting us right now.
Well, are you ready for some comments before we wrap up this episode?
More than
Before and
ready.
After Talks?
I remember reading these right when they happened, and I was blown away by the amount of the length of some of these comments, and like how strongly people had felt about just wanting to comment about, like, you know, their thoughts about this. So it just shows that, I mean, everybody, this is a topic that's still being talked about, and people have an opinion on it. So I'm very excited to hear about it, and let's see what they got.
Well, we got some comments, we got some messages, and there was a poll on Instagram. I think I pulled like 5 or so out of that group. They were decently long, so they attracted me. I figured that person sat down to actually give it some thought and put it into a comment, or just put it on a poll and messaged us. So thank you to all those who sent in stuff and commented. We are just going to use your first name, if that's okay. So to start it off, your friend Katie. She says, I think it does have a link. It has a bit to do with it, but not just that. Also more violent movies, TVs, and she put shoes, but it's shows, etc. She also commented and sent a message and put it on the poll. So I don't know how you feel about that. It just has more to do with it, kind of like we mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. The next one, Denise, it's not only video games. We're exposed to violence every day, music, media, movies, and just at home. People get sensitized. Instead of helping or running for safety, they watch and take pictures. So more of a bystander effect from Denise.
Just a quick correction. Did you mean sensitized or desensitized?
They put sensitized. Okay. Again. They're also typing.
It could just be an autocorrect or something like that. You can always go off. I like how they mentioned music. We haven't even touched on music and how certain genres of music
alone's been a big thing.
Can be such a big influence in that too. Because people identify themselves within music as well, and certain artists or certain lyrics, we really connect with that. So that's even a whole nother side of media that we haven't even touched. But that's for maybe another time. We won't go into that.
Media is such a good thing. All right, a few more. This one's from Dawn. She says, absolutely, you have children and young adults playing games with the sole intention of killing. It has taken away from human interaction and empathy.
Interesting.
So we kind of touched on violent. I was even saying when you read your list of top 10 games coming this fall, just because it was shooting, it kind of just associated it with violence.
Yes.
So that alone kind of touches on her thing.
Yep.
This next one's from Megan. She says, yes, I do believe so. In addition to children and adults losing the ability to interact in a positive way, they don't have empathy for others. They can't read emotions, and they don't think anything's going to happen to them. That's a huge thing, first of all. The fact that it'll just never be you. But to continue with what she said, it's a constant battle in my classroom and the high school team I coach. It's the generation.
Kind of touches on quite a few things that we talked about. Generational things, impact in the classroom, kids. Interesting. It's a good comment. I'm just thinking about it.
All right, and then Patricia will be our final one before we kind of talk about the poll. She says she was at the playground with her daughter and was glad to see kids outside playing instead of indoors playing video games. What bothered me was instead of playing tag, they were playing shooter with a gun and victims.
Wow.
Whoa. She said that was very disturbing to me. Sorry, I was a little taken aback by that. Very interesting game.
In a way, I sort of relate it to cops and robbers. I don't know about you, but
yep,
I always play that as I'm not saying it's the same, but I mean,
us
I remember
90s kids.
Yeah, right. Growing up, we'd play cops and robbers, but that's more of a realistic life thing of there's just the bad guys and the good guys, and it's just that thing I'm gonna arrest you, and then you get put in jail, and then that's all that happens. But that's very interesting on the observation of the way violence, or like even especially gun violence, has transpired into the way kids interact with each other and the games that they choose to play. It's not hide and go seek or tag. It's a form of a shooter game, just simplified to fit the playground. It's a very interesting
Very weird.
Yes.
They should stop
I
playing
mean, like,
that.
I know, I've been around kids, just within different jobs, and as I'm in the education field. And I mean, I'm not saying that that's unheard of, because I've had to tell kids before, like, no guns, like, we're not pretending, even if like you're pretending they're like water guns, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a thing that we have to
start
say, like,
something.
because exactly. And if they're normalizing it and almost becoming a little bit desensitized, so you have to still make them aware of, like, imagine I know you're just holding up your fingers, but that can transpire into something else maybe later on. And if you're so okay with that now, you never know what that could be later on in life. So
Yeah, even thinking back to some things that happened in childhood, you can probably see some signs there, and just learning more about the topic.
And not everybody grows into be a terrible, terrible person.
No.
I'm just saying that, these minor things that we might just, brush off our shoulders might really be something to think about, for sure.
Well, to move on to the Instagram poll, had a decent amount of responses there. Just hit yes or no on the question, do violent video games contribute to violence in society today? Do you have a guess for how it went?
Well, it's interesting because if you're putting it
I guess
as a question, as a yes or no question, you're making someone choose. There can't be that fine line, or
Nope.
there can't be that conversation aspect of, well, considering this, or well, that this might have an influence. You have to choose yes or no. So, I mean, based off the comments that we had just heard from Facebook, I'm gonna guess there's a pretty big percentage of yes over no. I don't necessarily know. I would say at least like 70-30.
Yeah, so it was 80-20.
Okay.
80 in favor of yes.
Yes.
And I think that's fair. You have to, even though it's not the biggest factor, if we've mentioned multiple times, it still could be a factor. And if it could be, then it's a yes, if you're going to go from that aspect.
Because you're making the viewers choose a yes or no. So I feel like people would be more gravitated to do yes. So that's interesting though, because then that still brings up the idea that people are still thinking about it, and in some way there's a connection. They're saying that there is a connection. So 80% of the people who have pulled this recognize that.
And to kind of just finish that up, this all stemmed from the second edition of After Hours. Yes, it may have been just a brief part in the 3-hour episode that it was, but it was still a conversation, and the words of they are just trying to find something to pin the blame on, and I don't think it should be video games came up, and that's what sparked this special, just one-off episode. I think it was great, and it was good to kind of talk through it a little bit, especially when I'm the one playing video games, and a lot of other people do.
Well, and exactly, and when you put the question out there for people to respond to, there was obviously some comments that people feel like they needed to say. So that means that this is an important topic that needs to be maybe talked about, or just maybe discussed more, or recognized at least. So I'm glad that we went a different way, except, besides our movie reviews, our video game reviews, or, the TV shows, all that sort of stuff, we went a different direction and talked about how it influences us every single day.
Yeah, and if you're listening right now and you think what we're saying is just not right at all, or if it is right, if you have an opinion, go ahead and definitely message us, where this conversation definitely isn't over.
No,
this
it
will always
shouldn't
be a
be.
thing, unfortunately.
And this is just a conversation between two people and what we've seen in our own lives, but our stories are different. And everybody else who has written in their comments or in the direct messages, they have their own lives and they have their own experiences too. So if you feel like you have something different, please let us know. Like you said, conversation's not over.
Like we mentioned, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Before and After Talks, and continue to keep following us. One more time, just want to go over the October schedule. That's this month, because this episode's coming out in just a few days. On the 11th is this episode. It's a Friday, Violence and Video Games. On the 15th is the Before on Ed Sheeran's number 6 Collaborations Project album, and then we're going to do the after review on the 18th of October. And then to finish off this month, right before Halloween, gotta have some spooky times, but unfortunately we don't have many spooky things in the episode. But on the 25th is going to be the 3rd edition of After Hours with Devin, the loud one, and Graydon. two of our best friends, me and Billy, got to sit down with those two. And After Hours, always have to preview it. It's an explicit bonus series to Before and After Talk. So don't think that's just how we are all the time. But it's, business is over for the day, just talking, catching up, and touching on some things that sometimes it gets a little important. Just like I mentioned, that's what inspired this whole episode. So
just people having conversations. That's the most important thing.
all right, so that's the October schedule. Maddie, thank you so much for joining me once again.
Thank you very much. I will be back soon, it seems.
Any fans of Maddie, yes, she's going to be, for October-wise, 2 more times. So I look forward to it.
Sounds good.
All right, that's this episode of Before and After Talks, episode 16. Can't believe it. We'll see you next time.